Imagine this. A man steps into a bar and seemingly evaporates into nothingness. It sounds like the start of a poor joke, doesn't it? But as it turns out, this is no laughing matter. In this episode, we delve into the perplexing disappearance of Brian Shaffer. This baffling case dates back to 2006, when Brian vanished inside a bar and to this day remains missing. So settle in and let's embark on this investigation together. Our tale unfolds in Ohio, centering around a man named Brian Shaffer. Born on February 25, 1979, Brian spent his childhood in Pickerington, Ohio, nurtured by his parents, Randy and Renee Shaffer, and alongside his brother Derek. After graduating from his hometown high school in 1997, he embarked on his academic journey at Ohio State University, pursuing a degree in medicine. Brian was known for his amiable nature, intelligence, and diligence. Besides his academic pursuits, he had a passion for playing guitar and a love for tropical vacations. It was during his time at Ohio State University that Brian's path crossed with Alexis Wagner, with whom he shared a deep and affectionate relationship. Fast forward to March 31st, 2006. It was a Friday, marking the onset of spring break. Brian, having just wrapped up his second year in microbiology, had plans to celebrate. But first, he committed to dining with his father at a local steakhouse. The bond between Randy and Brian was notably strong, a connection that only deepened after the heartbreaking loss of Renee Shaffer to a rare bone cancer just 3 weeks prior. This loss deeply affected Brian, Randy, and Derek, but they sought solace in each other's company. At dinner, Randy couldn't help but notice Brian's apparent exhaustion, likely a result of the intense study sessions leading up to his exams. Nevertheless, Brian was set on meeting his friends for drinks later that night, a well-deserved break. Around 9 p.m., after saying goodbye to his father, Brian joined his friend William Clint Florence at a bar on High Street. Brian and Clint embarked on a bar-hopping journey, savoring shots of liquor as they headed towards the Arena District of Columbus. Past midnight, while still enjoying their night out, they were joined by Clint's friend, Meredith Reed. Meredith drove them to the Ugly Tuna Salooner, where they intended to have their final drink of the night. The evening at the Ugly Tuna Salooner started like any other. The trio mingled, enjoyed the live music, and reveled in the lively atmosphere. Drinks and conversations flowed freely until suddenly, Brian was nowhere to be found. Clint and Reed searched the bar, the restrooms, and even outside, but Brian was missing. While it wasn't uncommon for Brian to slip away quietly, his friends still tried to locate him, calling and texting his phone multiple times. By 2 a.m., with the bar closing and no sign of Brian, Clint and Reed, after waiting outside for some time, assumed he had headed home on his own. So, they too decided to leave, unaware of the mystery that was about to unfold. The following morning, Brian's girlfriend, Alexis, reached out to him via his mobile phone, only to be directed to his voicemail. She didn't think much of it at first, assuming he was simply recovering from the previous night's festivities. Brian's father, Randy, also attempted to contact him, but like Alexis, was greeted with voicemail. As the day progressed into evening, Alexis's concern began to escalate. She and Brian had plans to fly to Miami in just 2 days, a trip she was eagerly anticipating. It was highly uncharacteristic of Brian not to respond to messages or calls, which only added to her growing unease. Finally, the day of their planned departure arrived. With her bags packed and flight ticket in hand, Alexis waited at the airport for Brian. However, Brian's uncharacteristic silence persisted. He never appeared. Both missed their flight. At this point, the worry for Brian's well-being intensified for both Alexis and Randy. They contacted the police and reported Brian as missing. The police promptly initiated their investigation, starting at the Ugly Tuna Saloon, the last known location where Brian was seen. Due to a recent surge in local crime, the bar was equipped with several security cameras. Upon examining the surveillance footage from the bar's sole entrance, the police spotted Brian along with Clint and Reed. The footage showed Brian with a close shave, neatly combed hair, wearing well-fitted jeans and an olive t-shirt. The surveillance footage revealed the trio ascending the escalator to the Ugly Tuna's main entrance at around 1:15 a.m. Brian was subsequently seen outside the bar at 1:55 a.m., engaging in a brief conversation with two young women. After bidding them farewell, he moved off camera, presumably heading back towards the bar. Intriguingly, this was the last confirmed sighting of Brian, as the camera failed to capture him exiting the Ugly Tuna when the establishment closed. This detail was particularly perplexing since the bar, located on the second floor, had only one main exit accessible by the monitored escalator. There was another exit, a service door, but it was off-limits to the public and led directly to a construction site, making it a highly unlikely and challenging route for anyone to navigate, especially if intoxicated. The Ugly Tuna Saloon, along with the building it resided in, was a relatively new construction, completed about a year earlier. While the bar was fully operational, the rest of the building was still predominantly unfinished, composed of steel and concrete. As part of the investigation, police and bar staff meticulously tallied the number of patrons entering and exiting throughout the night. The final count indicated that one less person left the bar than entered. This suggested that even if Brian had somehow altered his appearance, he would have still been counted by the camera upon exiting. More unsettling was the implication that if Brian had left, he did so alone. Otherwise, the count would have shown two fewer people. Considering the area surrounding the Ugly Tuna was well covered by public security cameras, the police were hopeful that these additional surveillance resources might provide further clues about Brian's movements later that evening. Despite extensive efforts to review countless hours of surveillance footage from around the local area, no further sightings of Brian were ever captured. The police investigation uncovered that the last known communication to Brian's phone was a text message from Clint at approximately 2:10 a.m., inquiring about his whereabouts. The search for Brian extended well beyond the Ugly Tuna Saloon, encompassing a thorough sweep of the surrounding streets. Police officers and canine units combed through alleys, inspected dumpsters and waste bins, conducted interviews with locals, and even probed the city's sewer system. Regrettably, these exhaustive searches yielded no significant leads. Brian's apartment, located roughly 6 blocks from the Ugly Tuna on King Avenue, was found undisturbed. His car remained parked outside, and inside, everything was in order, his bed neatly made, and all his belongings accounted for. The investigation expanded for miles in every direction from the bar, yet no tangible evidence or clues surfaced. Speculation arose as to whether Brian might have chosen to disappear, possibly overwhelmed by grief after his mother's death just 25 days earlier. However, this theory raised further questions. How had he left the bar, and why in such an enigmatic manner? Everyone who had interacted with Brian that night was requested to undergo a lie detector test. While those who consented passed, it was noted that Clint declined to take the test, a point we will delve into later. The mystery of Brian Shaffer's disappearance remained impenetrable, with no adequate evidence or rationale emerging to explain his vanishing. As the months passed without any breakthroughs or evidence, the momentum of the case began to wane. Yet, Alexis, Brian's girlfriend, continued to hold on to hope for his return. She found solace each night in a ritual of calling Brian's mobile phone, longing to hear his voice on the voicemail message, and also checking to see if his phone would ever reactivate. Then, one unexpected evening in September 2006, as Alexis settled into bed and made her routine call, something startling happened. Brian's phone actually rang. Overwhelmed with disbelief, Alexis dialed his number again, and to her astonishment, it rang a second and then a third time. She quickly alerted the police, who also tried calling Brian's phone. On their first attempt, it rang briefly before hanging up. However, on the second attempt, it went directly to voicemail. The police were able to trace the phone's signal during the brief period it was active. The call pinged off a cell tower located approximately 23 kilometers northwest of Columbus, Ohio. Regrettably, as Brian's phone lacked GPS functionality, this was the furthest extent of the lead they could pursue. Despite the fleeting glimmer of hope provided by the phone call, nothing substantive emerged from it. Singular, Brian's mobile service provider, suggested that the incident could have simply been a technical glitch. No further leads related to the phone or Brian materialized, and the case gradually became stagnant. Randy Shaffer, still reeling from the loss of his wife just 3 weeks before Brian's disappearance, dedicated himself tirelessly to the search for his son. His unwavering hope led him to forge hundreds of new connections. Tragically, his quest came to an abrupt end on September 14, 2008. During the tumultuous Hurricane Hook, which battered Ohio with severe storms, Randy was struck by a large tree branch while tending to his backyard in Baltimore. The incident proved fatal, and neighbors discovered his body the following morning. Randy was one of 6 fatalities attributed to the hurricane, a startling and heartbreaking twist of fate. In the wake of Randy's death, and as Alexis gradually moved on with her life, the investigation into Brian's disappearance naturally dwindled over the years. To this day, the truth about what happened to Brian Shaffer remains an enigma. However, various theories have circulated, one prominent conjecture being that Brian might have chosen to start a new life elsewhere, leaving his old one behind. Brian was deeply affected by the loss of his mother, her passing occurring a mere 3 weeks before he vanished. Around the same time, Brian was experiencing doubts about his career path. These inner reflections were evident in a post he made on his MySpace profile, where he expressed his profound passion for music. He wrote, "I really love music, and this whole doctor thing is really just a job, only temporary, until I get my bands together and put out a record. I want to own an island someday, or at least a beach so I can listen to Buffett all day and drink margaritas with my señorita." Given these circumstances and his recent bereavement, one might speculate that Brian chose to leave his existing life behind to pursue what truly made him happy. This theory suggests that perhaps, spurred by the realization that life is fleeting, Brian decided to embark on a new journey, doing what he genuinely desired. However, this possibility is tempered by the perspectives of those who knew him best. Alex, Randy, and Derek all believed that Brian was too compassionate and considerate to abruptly disappear without a word of farewell. Furthermore, this theory fails to address why he would avoid using the bar's main entrance. If Brian had indeed planned to leave undetected, he could have simply disguised himself to exit unnoticed. Detective Andrew Edwards, deeply involved in the investigation, explored the possibility that Brian might have changed his clothes and left the Ugly Tuna Saloon undetected. However, Edwards stated with absolute certainty that Brian did not exit via the escalator. Another prominent theory suggests that Brian attempted to leave the bar through the service door and, finding himself in the construction area, became trapped and met with a tragic end. On the night of his disappearance, the building housing the Ugly Tuna was still under construction. Although there was a back exit, navigating it, especially after consuming alcohol, would have been a formidable challenge. Adding to the intrigue of the mystery is the peculiar timing of Brian's friends' attempts to contact him just minutes after he was last seen. During this brief window, Brian did not respond to their calls, a behavior completely out of character for him. This led to rampant speculation that he may have already been in trouble, or perhaps still inside the Ugly Tuna, when his friends tried to reach him. The uncertainty surrounding those crucial moments raises haunting questions about what might have transpired within that time frame. What makes this theory even more compelling is the consideration of the construction site adjacent to the bar. It seems improbable that Brian would have had enough time to traverse the construction site unnoticed, especially given the short span between his last known sighting and his friends' attempts to contact him. The police's response to inquiries about when or even if the construction site was thoroughly searched has been notably vague, and they have consistently refrained from disclosing their leading theories regarding Brian's fate. This lack of transparency has inevitably led to further speculation. Could it be possible that Brian accidentally fell into a construction pit and was subsequently covered by cement, concealing any evidence of his presence? However, this theory is just one thread in the complex tapestry of the Brian Shaffer case. Another line of thought suggests that Brian might have successfully left the ugly tuna, only to meet his demise later, perhaps in a different location altogether. Yet, this theory is perplexing in its own right, as no trace of Brian, whether it be his body, clothes, wallet, or phone, has ever been discovered. Columbus is a densely populated area, and it stands to reason that if Brian had indeed been a victim of foul play, his remains would likely have been discovered by now. The absence of any such discovery adds an eerie layer of mystery to his disappearance. Additionally, it is relatively uncommon for a spontaneous perpetrator of violence to go to great lengths to conceal a body, especially in a place as bustling as Columbus. All of Brian's acquaintances who were present that night were thoroughly investigated and cleared, with each of them passing a polygraph test, except for one notable exception that brings us to our final theory. The question arises: could Clint, Brian's close friend who spent the entire evening with him, have been involved in Brian's disappearance? As the person who shared the most time with Brian that night, it's conceivable that Brian might have confided in Clint if he had any plans to leave unexpectedly. Furthermore, Clint and other witnesses informed the police of a verbal dispute between him and Brian on the night of the disappearance, which raises questions about whether Clint harbored any animosity towards Brian. Clint's refusal to undergo a polygraph test further fuels these suspicions. His immediate decision to seek legal representation upon being asked to take the test, coupled with his subsequent severing of ties with Brian's friends and acquaintances, raises even more questions. What might Clint be concealing, if anything? However, it's essential to note that polygraph tests are not always reliable and can produce false results, adding complexity to this aspect of the investigation. Furthermore, rumors circulating at the time suggested that Clint may have had involvement with drugs around the time Brian vanished. This might explain his reluctance to take a polygraph test and potentially expose himself to legal risks that could jeopardize his future career. Despite these considerations, Brian's brother Derek is of the opinion that Clint knows more than he has shared, casting a shadow of suspicion on their friendship. As it stands, Clint remains silent, leaving the case of Brian Shaffer shrouded in a cloak of mystery and unanswered questions. Determining which theory is closest to the truth or comprehending what truly happened to Brian remains an enigma that continues to confound investigators and those who have followed the case closely. His friends and family, who knew him intimately, continue to hold on to the hope that he might one day return, despite the passage of time. While the police maintain a formal stance that Brian could still be out there, alive, those closest to him find it increasingly difficult to believe that he would leave without a word, considering his compassionate nature and close ties to his loved ones. As I reflect on this perplexing case, I find myself particularly intrigued by the construction site theory. It seems imperative to conduct a thorough investigation using ground-penetrating radar to scrutinize the walls and floors of the site, ensuring that no evidence has been overlooked. The mystery of how Brian could have escaped unnoticed from such a place remains baffling, and a closer examination of the site may hold the key to unlocking this enigma. If Brian did indeed manage to elude everyone and is still out there somewhere, his return would be highly anticipated. The skills he exhibited in vanishing without a trace might even impress the Secret Service. However, the more time passes, the dimmer the hope becomes and the mystery deepens. This story serves as a haunting reminder of the importance of looking out for our friends, especially when they're intoxicated. We all know someone who tends to slip away quietly at the end of a night out, and it's crucial to remember to keep an eye on them, ensuring their safety. If you found the case of Brian Shaffer as intriguing as I did, please stick around for more captivating stories. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like this video. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on the Brian Shaffer mystery. Do you believe he left the bar that night, Or could he still be there, hidden in some way? Share your theories in the comments below, and I'll make sure to join in the discussion as we collectively attempt to unravel this perplexing puzzle.